Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has inaugurated a new Palestinian embassy at the Vatican. Abbas unveiled a plaque and flag at the new mission. Diplomatic relations between the two sides were officially established 2 years ago. Abbas also repeated calls to US President-elect Donald Trump to stop plans to transfer Washington's embassy in Israel to Jerusalem. During his visit, Abbas also met with Pope Francis. Their talks came ahead of an international conference in Paris, which is aimed at reviving the Middle East peace talks.
This was the third time that Pope Francis and President Abbas met, and another cordial meeting between the two leaders. Pope Francis is really pushing for a new opening, fresh dialogue in the Middle East. He wants to see peace in the Middle East. He's spoken out many times about the need for peace in Syria. He wants to see fresh dialogue between the Israelis and the Palestinians. And this meeting was part of that process. It's also to mark the opening of the Palestinian embassy to the Holy See. And President Abbas said after the talks, Pope Francis was a man of peace who loved the Palestinian people. So these talks today are significant. They come ahead of the peace talks in Paris on Sunday. And before he met Pope Francis, President Abbas had talks with the Italian Foreign Minister Angelino Alfano, who reaffirmed his support for a two-state solution, while also warning the Palestinian leader he wants to see any acts of violence condemned by the Italian government if they take place in Palestinian territories. So both talks with the Italian government and with Pope Francis, a step on the way to Paris, and hopefully for the Palestinians, a new opening for the peace process in the Middle East.
Abbas said he hopes the example of the Vatican is followed by others. This embassy is a place of pride for us, and we hope that all countries of the world recognise the state of Palestine, he said, because this recognition will bring us closer to the peace process.
Diplomats from around the world will gather in Paris on Sunday to try to get some movement on long-stalled Israeli-Palestinian peace talks. But Israel has rejected the initiative.
In December, the UN Security Council passed a resolution demanding that Israel seize Jewish settlements in the occupied West Bank. And this weekend, top diplomats from at least 70 nations are gathering in Paris to show support for the creation of a Palestinian state. But French President François Hollande is playing down the prospects for peace.
Peace will be achieved by the Israelis and the Palestinians and by no one else. Only bilateral relations can bring it about. Sunday's meeting must remind us of the determination to support a two-state solution.
It's a bit like a wedding without a bride and groom. More than 70 countries are together in an attempt to resuscitate the peace talks, which have been stalled for almost 3 years. But neither Israelis nor Palestinians have been invited after Israel boycotted the conference.
There are other such efforts that render peace hopeless, and one of them is the Paris conference. It's a rigged conference, rigged by the Palestinians with French auspices to adopt additional anti-Israel stances. This pushes peace backward. It's not going to obligate us. It's a relic of the past. It's a last gasp of the past before the future sets in.
Russia says it's ready to host peace talks if both sides agree to attend. Both Hamas and Fatah representatives are in Moscow trying to find a unified position should the talks happen.
So, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas accepted the Russian president's offer to meet Mr. Netanyahu in Moscow, and our consent remains in place.
But the hopes for a peace resolution still remain elusive. Palestinians and Israelis will have to wait a little bit longer before they can live side by side in peace.
Tonight, a possible foreign policy shakeup from the president-elect before he's even sworn in. Donald Trump now suggesting those sanctions against Russia imposed for hacking may be short-lived.
I don't know that I'm going to get along with Vladimir Putin. I hope I do.
Trump telling the Wall Street Journal he'll keep President Obama's sanctions at least for a period of time. But, quote, if you get along and if Russia is really helping us, why would anybody have sanctions if somebody's doing really great things? Trump laying the groundwork for his future relationship with Russia's Vladimir Putin in that press conference this week.
If Putin likes Donald Trump, guess what, folks? That's called an asset, not a liability.
In an interview with the Wall Street Journal, Trump suggested if Russia helps the U.S. fight terrorism and achieve other goals, the sanctions aren't needed. In December, President Obama sanctioned 3 Russian companies, 6 individuals, and 2 Russian intelligence agencies in response to the accusations that it interfered in the U.S. presidential election. Russia is also under sanctions for annexing Crimea, which the U.S. and several allies say was a violation of international law. Trump said he wants his administration to strengthen ties with Russia. Putin says he's ready at any moment to meet with Trump.
China is ripping us off. You know who's getting the oil? China. What China is doing to us is horrible.
Speaking to the Wall Street Journal on Friday, Trump said he would not commit to any existing agreement until he saw, quote, progress from China on issues such as trade and currency valuation. Everything is under negotiation, including one China, Trump said. But the incoming U.S. president stopped short of confirming language he used during his campaign when he said he would label China a currency manipulator once taking office. I would talk to them first, Trump said. Certainly they are manipulators, but I'm not looking to do that. Chinese officials have indicated such tough talk could lead to a trade war between the world's 2 biggest economies. While noting it would work with any U.S. administration, Beijing has urged Trump against taking any bold steps to change the status quo.
An official ceremony in Poland to welcome 4,000 U.S. troops as part of a NATO deployment. It's seen as a show of force to Russia, which has slammed the move as a threat to its national security. It also comes less than a week before the swearing-in of U.S. President-elect Trump, who's vowed to improve relations with Moscow.
Poland, Bulgaria, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Romania had requested the NATO assistance after Moscow's annexation of Crimea in 2014, fearing further Russian military operations in the region. A senior Russian Air Force commander has announced the deployment of more S-400 Triumph missile systems to Crimea, but kept mum on when exactly the surface-to-air missile systems would be deployed. On Saturday, 8 mobile air defense missile systems deployed in Crimea were put on combat duty near the city of Feodosia. This comes after U.S. President Barack Obama announced the 1-year extension of sanctions against Russia for its purported annexation of Crimea and its use of force in Ukraine.
Russia has reportedly invited Donald Trump's incoming administration to attend upcoming Syria peace talks in Kazakhstan. The current U.S. administration said on Friday that it had not been asked to take part. The State Department spokesman Mark Toner said Trump's administration would seriously consider the offer. New Syrian peace negotiations were announced last December after a nationwide ceasefire was secured by Russia and Turkey.
An EU watchdog has compiled a list of activists and journalists it considers to be pro-Russian propagandists. The list was put together by the EU's Stratcom task force, which was set up in 2015 with a mission to counter Russia's so-called disinformation campaigns. The group's work has sparked major debate in Denmark and has even been challenged in the Danish parliament.
Is very concerned with the Russian-controlled systematic use of disinformation in the form of lies and deliberate manipulation of facts.
Does the minister think it is appropriate that a prominent Danish critic of Islam has been put on the list of sources of Russian disinformation?
I agree with the task force assessment that it constitutes a typical example of the Kremlin's narrative about the West's moral collapse.
I am once again shocked by the minister. It is just a position that is entirely legitimate to have, and as many parties, including my own, have had for a long time, namely that we are skeptical about Muslim immigration in Europe.
Well, another Danish journalist claims she's also been put on the list. She says she's been hounded for spreading so-called Russian disinformation. Iben Tranholm was accused of pushing the Kremlin's narrative after her statements on European migrant policy were featured here on RT and on the website Russia Insider.
I mean, today it's me who is on the list. Tomorrow it could be a different journalist, another journalist who has, similar views. They claim that I'm damaging, I'm doing harm to the EU just by criticizing them. I criticize them for the immigration policy. That is a narrative that, people in the EU disagree. The new political tool to undermine your opponent is to link the person with Russia.
The United Nations has called on countries across Europe to do more to protect refugees facing harsh winter conditions.
Europe is a rich continent. We should be able to deal with these refugees, this caseload of refugees and migrants. But there is a need for more solidarity, responsibility sharing. This is a call we've made many times and will continue doing so until actions are taken.
The UN official added that 5 refugees have died due to the cold snap, while 1,000 people, including children, are living in unheated tents on the Greek island of Samos. The UN Human Rights Council has also denounced Western Balkan countries that are reportedly pushing refugees to neighboring states, leaving them stranded.
There have been scuffles between Somali refugees and police outside the office of regional authorities in Florence. The migrants are demanding solutions after a fire on Thursday destroyed the shelter they were being housed in.
Belgian police conducted several house raids in Brussels on Saturday. Prosecutors say nothing was found in the searches, but police did bring in 3 people for questioning. The raids took place in the Molenbeek district, which gained international attention after the November 2015 Paris attacks. The attackers behind that assault had lived in Molenbeek. Patrols have been stepped up in the district since the Paris attack and since the 2 suicide bombings in Brussels last year.
Pepper is a humanoid robot.
Hi, how are you?
The programmers here at Zorabots in Belgium teach their robots to operate as receptionists and carers and companions, among other things. But what if robots like Pepper get so smart through artificial intelligence they could commit a crime?
We're producing software for robots, and this is more key because we make the robots do things, so we must be really careful what the robots can and cannot do.
The European Parliament wants a clear set of EU laws to decide who's to blame if a robot is used to commit a crime, or commits one accidentally, either the manufacturer, the operator, or even perhaps the robot itself. The European Parliament's proposals aren't only covering humanoid robots like Zora here, are they?
No, they're not. Check.
There's also driverless cars, drones, medical robots, and robots used in industry. And as the technology expands, new uses are springing up all the time. Lawmakers also have concerns about the amount of data robots will have access to, and with many more robots set to enter people's homes, they're worried the machines could be used to spy on people. There are also fears about job losses as robots take over positions from people. This proposal is just the first step in putting together European legislation, which could include a rule to ensure all robots have a kill switch to shut them off if something goes wrong. And the EU might set up a special agency to deal with just robotics law. Robots like Pepper and Zora could end up being given special legal status as an electronic person.
Marching through Washington, D.C., civil rights activists led by Reverend Al Sharpton are kicking off a week of protests ahead of President-elect Donald Trump's inauguration.
We come to say to the Democrats in the Senate and in the House and into the moderate Republicans to get some backbone, get some guts.
It's a message Sharpton promises to keep up, vowing not to back down.
We won't be trumped. We won't be trumped.
A message yelled here, loud and clear.
Personal story segment tonight. One of the bands performing at the inauguration is from Talladega College in Alabama. That school founded by former slaves after the Civil War. But as we reported last week, there's an amazing pressure being put upon people not to perform at the inauguration, and many have buckled, but not Talladega.
The Talladega College Marching Tornadoes now have plenty of money to play at President-elect Donald Trump's inauguration. The small, historically black college was struggling to raise the $75,000 needed to fund the trip to Washington, D.C. for the band's 230 members. That was until Talladega College President Billy C. Hawkins went on Fox News' top-rated show, The O'Reilly Factor, which averages over 3 million viewers. Within a day, the band's GoFundMe page went from $50,000 to more than $300,000. Talladega alumni and others have criticized the band's decision to play for Trump. Hawkins said in a news conference that band members were excited to perform and none had backed out in protest.
2 new tropical mosquitoes capable of carrying viruses dangerous to you and me have been discovered in Florida. For nearly a decade, Florida has been invaded by a growing number of exotic mosquitoes capable of transmitting diseases like dengue and Zika. Just as the state has finally managed to curb the spread of Zika, 2 new virus-carrying mosquitoes have been discovered in the southern part of the state. The newest breeds of flying vectors were discovered in Homestead and Florida City. Experts say the Adiomia and Culex mosquitoes can spread several debilitating viruses to humans, including the Everglades virus. These breeds are native to Central and South America and generally thrive in swampy wetlands. Experts believe the new mosquitoes likely arrived on plants and spread across canals and ponds in South Florida. While the spread of the Everglades virus so far hasn't been detected, experts worry once the weather gets warmer, mosquitoes could spread the disease from wetlands to human-dominated habitats. The discovery comes at a particularly bad time for South Florida. Over the summer, a Zika outbreak in this area created alarm among residents and drove away tourists and their spending dollars.
Moon Hong Nam is a pastry chef in Seoul. He needs to break 15,000 eggs a day to bake cakes for his customers. But these days, every egg he breaks is twice the price it used to be. That's because of an outbreak of bird flu in the country.
If bird flu continues, we will have to raise prices even more.
As the supply of eggs slows down, some stores have gone even further than hiking prices by restricting the number of eggs sold per person.
We usually eat eggs a lot, but I feel very anxious that the price of eggs has increased so much.
The bird flu outbreak reached its peak last month because of the rapid spread of the H5N6 virus. That's prompted the biggest ever cull of the chickens and other poultry. Millions of birds have been gassed to fight the outbreak. To solve the supply problem, South Korea's government has started importing eggs. This first shipment from the US contains almost 3 million eggs. They will be distributed to grocery stores and supermarkets ahead of the Lunar New Year. But it's a costly exercise and they'll have to keep it up until next year. That's how long it takes to rebuild poultry stocks.
The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency has finalized new guidelines for using certain pesticides, and people are already arguing about it. Basically, the EPA backed away from restricting a handful of pesticides that have been linked to harming honeybees. In a separate release, the EPA admitted contact with the pesticides can harm bees and their larvae, but the agency said most approved uses aren't significant risks to entire colonies. The guidelines will likely be good news for growers, but some environmental agencies are up in arms. One expert said it's outrageous the EPA said the pesticides were dangerous for bees, but still loosened restrictions. The move also seems to go against bundles of research from other countries that say this class of pesticides not only harms bees, but also other non-target insects. Pesticides helped put a species of bumblebee on the U.S. endangered list for the first time early this year. While the EPA won't be restricting the use of chemicals for now, a full risk assessment on how pesticides affect honeybees is expected to finish next year.
Like any good dad,
Come across.
Mark Sable helps his children see their path.
Come down this way?
But the past year, it's been Mark who struggled to find his way.
It's been real hard just to make sure food's on the table and just everyday things with the kids.
Last winter, at just 28 years old, Mark's wife Belinda found a 14-pound tumor. First came surgery, then a diagnosis, stage 4 ovarian cancer. Within months, she was gone, and soon Mark, an overnight custodian, was scrambling to provide for his 2 young kids.
They've had some tough times.
Often barely with the basics. Some nights the family slept in their car.
Sometimes you think, what can I do? But it's always like, oh, that's really sad. And then you just go on with your day, you know, and there's no action. And it just takes one person to take action.
That person was Holly Lafferty.
Okay, we need to do something here.
Who overheard Mark's story in the waiting room of her son's clinic and posted a simple Facebook message asking for help. Soon, dozens of strangers had answered.
It blows my mind.
Bringing clothes and toys and money for a young father they didn't know.
By the time I got home that day, I already had donations piling on my doorstep. That just kept coming.
The gifts filled an entire room at the clinic.
Dun, 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 dun.
And the hearts of 2 small children who have lost so much and have so little.
Wow, look at all this stuff, you guys.
A fresh start for a dad and his kids, and a lesson that kindness is everywhere.
Everybody has a village, you just don't know it.